Okay, great. And I appreciate the intro. Thanks for letting me host the fifth in our series about this great new book, Implementing Data Mesh, that has been written by Jean-Georges Perrin and Eric Broda. And I have the most fun job of the three of us. I get to moderate this discussion and a little bit about me before we sort of jump into the content for this week. I've been doing data architecture and data management for 30 years, and it's something I currently practice. I'm a recovering consultant. I like to say that so that people know that I've spent the last 10 years sort of focused on the engineering aspects of data management, which is how I started my career. And so I'd like to throw it over to Eric to introduce himself and then Jean-Georges to give you a little bit of intro before we get into this week's session.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Eric wrote out of Toronto, Canada, co-author of the Implementing Data Mesh book. About 40 years experience in the industry, almost all of it in financial services technology, executive at global banks, insurance companies, and most recently, last 7 years, started my own consulting company where we do ecosystems. We build ecosystems, whether it's server, in the old days, it was services and service mesh. Now it's data products and data mesh, as well as an emerging topic that I'm writing a fair amount about is agents and the agentic mesh. So that's about me.
I
Jean-Georges.
guess I guess it's me. I'm still wondering why are you not retired, Eric? Because it's 40 years in business. You should be retiring soon.
There's
But
a
we need
story
your brain.
behind that. There's a good story, a fun story about that for another day.
Yeah, well, I don't know, John. Just write up the questions, okay?
No,
I don't want to do your job here, but okay. Well, so just as we're getting to this fifth episode, I see that you can probably feel that we are a little bit um, flirting with humor. So my name is Jean-Georges. I often go by JGP. Um, for those non-Canadian in the audience, and I recently changed job, but I was one of the creator of the first data mesh at PayPal. Now looking at what we can do with data products and data contracts, and co-author with Eric of implementing data mesh, which has been a fun journey so far.
thanks, KGP. And I really, I've always started these conversations with a pretty simple question, but teach us, and I'll throw to you first, JGP. What inspired you to put this on paper and write the book?
I think it started a bit as a joke. I think I don't know if I've got you. It's the fifth time you're asking me the questions, and I don't know if I've actually lied four times or if I've got the same answer right for the first the five times. But it was really about me teasing Eric and Eric teasing me back about writing a book, and then we ended up doing it. But the thing is, we're both passionate about that. We're just passionate also about sharing knowledge, and I think it was this combination of those passions that made us write a book, and we put a lot of energy and a lot of love and a lot of emotions in this books, and you know what? We're still friends.
How would you add to that, Eric, about your journey to getting this book?
Yeah, I think this time I think Jean George, you were accurate. I think that was exactly how he came about to this. But ultimately, in those dialogues that we had, we said to ourselves, we think Zamak's book is wonderful, and it provides a ton of principles around how data mesh can drive significant value in organizations. And what we said is we want to actually translate those principles into practice. How do people actually really go about doing this? What are the ins and outs of data contracts, data products, and related capability to actually allow you to not only build data products, but build them at scale and govern them and operate them. So that's what's in the book, and that's kind of the background around why we thought it was so important to do.
Okay, good answer. And I notice your voice fades a little bit when you're answering some
Ah,
of the questions. So
I'll make sure my microphone's here in front of me.
well, you have a lot to say, and you're a well-organized thinker, and you do have a very methodical way to address things. So people often say they want to hear what you're saying.
That's a change.
Thought it was true.
Fair point. You will hear
So
much more of me as we go forward.
yeah, and so as I think we've all sort of explored this topic together in these sessions, and with the changes that have happened over the last 12 to 24 months with LinkedIn, there is so much discussion going on about these topics, but it's rare to find people that have actually done the work versus hypothesized about it and have battle scars from having tried to implement things and failed. We often learn a lot from those, and then succeed and then try to capture a moment of time. That's what I think. When I think of your book, I think you're capturing us in a moment of time where we have talked about data mesh for years now, it feels, at least a couple of good solid years. Zamek's book has come out, and people want to see evidence of how others are making decisions around implementing data mesh. So I love being on this journey with you guys. I think the book comes at a great time and has great examples in it. And so this week we said we're going to talk about the chapter 16 and really about establishing a practical data mesh road. But before we sort of go in with our canned answer to what is that, why don't you tell us an interest? I would like you each to think about an interesting story that you can share with us about your implementation of data mesh. But, I really think the diagram and the way you framed the discussion, I know around the roadmap for data mesh is really interesting as well. So I do want to cover that, the content in the book and why it's so powerful, I think, and give us a story or two about your experience, executing that roadmap. And let me just pause for a second. One of the things I would love to do, we've done this in other sessions, is we show a diagram. And I usually do something silly like this, try to show people a diagram. I'm just thinking it might be worth, after we talk about, a story or two about this particular chapter, that we get into show people the picture and then you can explain some of the streams. So I'm going to start, I'm going to throw the ball over to you, Eric. Tell us about an interesting story about one of the data mesh projects that you led from inception that really uh, has some meat on the bone that you would
Yeah,
like.
sure. So way back when, probably one of the first implementations of data mesh and data products that I was involved in. I was a senior executive at this firm, and we had a particular business problem that one of our business sponsors actually wanted to solve. And what they said to me was that the current approach would take a long time, and what they were looking for was something innovative. Now, this is right around the time that Zamak put her book out, so we weren't as aware of data mesh as we are today, obviously. And what we did do is I talked with our CIO and we came up with a game plan. But ultimately, what we said is that we tried to actually embody the agile principles and try to figure how we could apply these agile principles to make our data products, although we didn't call it quite that at the time, our data products agile. And could we actually deliver on this business outcome in a much quicker and timely fashion. So this, of course, as technology people, we start with the technology hammer. Everything looks like the technology nail, and we went about implementing and looking at and then implementing, or at least starting the implementation of a variety of technology initiatives. And then, in a roundabout way, from my previous experience, and probably similar to you, JGP and John, we realize that the key to success is not the technology. We tend to find ways to actually implement that. It's usually experts in there somewhere that can help us figure that out. But the real secret to success is how do we actually win the hearts and minds, if you will, of the broader organization so that we remove the antibodies from change and we start to figure out a way to actually accommodate the change. So, long story short, what we ended up doing was yes, we started the technology stream, but then what we did is a lot of executive horsepower went into actually addressing the organizational side, the operating model. We ended up setting up platform teams, which we didn't know would be called platform teams today. And we ended up setting up a core product team, which would soon be a data product team that had core responsibilities. We had an owner, we had a mandate, we had funding, and that actually, the whole organizational setup was probably the hardest thing to do, is the heaviest lift. But I would actually attribute that to be the greatest success factor we had in this, which is part of when we talk about the roadmap. You'll see that's integrated into our roadmap approach.
Okay, well, that's a great example, and I think that's good. And I just want to summarize what I heard. A couple of the key points is that there was a transformational project. You were in an ideal position to say, I can do this faster. You
Correct.
accelerated delivery. And you said you could promise the outcome that they expected, but you could do it much faster. And your underlying hypothesis is that if you could transform the organization into a core product team, a platform team, and then you organized around agile delivery for data, you could magically make it all work. Okay, we'll talk about that example, I'm sure. But did that catch some of the key points about that, or what?
Yeah, I think you made it sound much simpler than it actually was when I tried to do it, but I think you captured the essence of it.
But I think that's the problem with books and listening to experts is that they've done it so many times that it seems simple. Oh, all you need is sponsorship. You need a big program. But the truth is you had to be at the right place at the right time with the right approach, and it allowed you to succeed. And then, because I've heard the story before, and then you realized, wow, a lot of the principles that you implemented from your background and software engineering and API management and all your thinking around data, it coalesced around calling it a data mesh project because you realized, hey, I'm delivering data products in a systematic way, and so I just want people to hear that from you that it's easy to say, hard to do.
Yeah, well, just one quick comment, and then I'll ask JGP for his opinion. But as with many things, we're not doing core research. What we're doing is applying other people's great ideas. We're literally standing on the shoulders of the giants who created microservices and such like that. So the truth of the matter is, I strongly agree with the right place, right time, but it's also the epiphany that you can actually apply existing technology in new ways to actually do new things. So I don't consider myself a researcher coming up with brand new, crazy ideas. Rather, I think I'm actually a journeyman that knows how to apply a whole bunch of different tools to build, the next big thing.
Okay, good. So we'll anchor on that story. Let's, JGP, do you mind giving a bit of a quick overview of one of your first implementation projects that led you to this? Tell us a story about that. Make it
Yeah.
interesting.
So, well, I don't know if it's going to be an interesting story, but when when I joined PayPal, I was not hired to build a data mesh or an implementation of data mesh. I was hired to solve data problem, and we were thinking that a data platform would be the solution. So we looked at the we looked at the specs, we looked at the different aspects we wanted to integrate, we looked at the problems, and we came up with a roadmap and some ideas. And in the meanwhile, we hired people. They were ready to start. They started, very, very quickly, very on the spot. A great team of people. And 3 months in, we just realized, oh wow, this gal, Jean-Marc Degani, wrote this thing, and it's like very close to what we were building. Okay, so since then, I'm kind of using the analogy of the DNA of the human versus a monkey. We were probably kind of at the monkey level, but with a little bit of effort, we would be to the human level. Okay, and that's what we did. So it was. As you said, it was harder because it was forcing us to think at a different scale and with different things. But on the other hand, what was easier is that she gave some kind of hints about what we needed to do. Okay, and some of the feelings that were shared with Eric is that okay, our book fell a little short when it came to making, implementation recommendation or architecture decisions or things like that. And but that's kind of my story to data mesh. Okay, so and I think something else than Eric and I witnessed is that I think we are at an inception point, or we were at an inception point with data and data engineering, data management. Um, there was really the before data mesh or data product or data contract, name it as something. Okay, there was a before and there is the after, and we are now in the after. It's still a little chaotic. Okay, it still lacks some standardization, some direction, but I think we're incrementally going there.
Well, I really just appreciate that, Jean-Georges. Did I, okay, yeah, you're still there, but you're very close. Hey, I think you were finished. I didn't mean to interrupt if you weren't.
No, I was finished.
Okay, very good. Because we got a series of questions in, and thank you. This specifically, Robin has been asking some great questions, and I think these are the questions we all feel when we're picking up the book and trying to internalize it and apply it. And so the first question is really about, okay, I get the idea, but how do I execute this? Heard that question many times, um, and so that's the first question. But the second is really, looking at it from a pragmatic or technical perspective, how does the book give guidance about how to approach the federated computation part? So Robin's asking about how do I get started? How should I think about federated computation? How should I think about tools to enforce governance? And, how do I automate all of those things when it comes to things like data contracts? And I just want to, it's a familiar set of questions that we often get. And I'd like you to try to talk about the answer to those questions. And like I'll do, I'll always start with Eric, I guess, and get your opinion and then throw to Jean-Paul. But let's just start with the beginning. How do I get started and do it? And
Yeah.
if you give
Yeah,
me some.
there's a pretty common approach that to get started. But before I go through that, I just wanted to highlight John and myself. John's one of our technical reviewers, and I remember one of the dialogues. I think the comment from John was You know what you have in chapter 16, that roadmap? I think that should be like chapter 1 or 2 in a book called Implementing Data Mesh. We ended up putting it as chapter 16 at literally the last chapter as a culmination. The theory here is you'd understand the concepts and how they all bind together, how to implement those, and you'd be able to kind of sequence them. But anyway, real quickly, how do you get started? Everybody does not start with a full data mesh. You're not building a data mesh. You're building a data product. And if you're good and successful, you have the right to actually build more of them, and eventually they become an ecosystem or a mesh. The very first data product is kind of one piece of the what we call a factory or delivery stream in our roadmap, which we will talk in much more depth. But it really boils down to is that very first one is crucial. You have to have a way to figure out what that first one should be. So we have some strategy stuff, which we'll talk about. And once you figured that out, you have to figure out how you're going to put that thing in a proof of concept to show that you can do it. How you move it into an MVP. My definition, MVP goes into production. So you have some learnings. And then how do you socialize that to actually get the biggest bang for the buck? Because once you have that first one done and you are actually successful, you met the business outcome, then what you can do and what you should be doing is telling the world about how you did this and how you made data agile and how you delivered great business outcomes. Then with the wind at your sails, you have the opportunity to talk, you have the right and the opportunity to talk about your second one. And then once you do your second, third, and fourth, then you get to then you start to have to think about in earnest things like operating model, governance, um, team structure, and those again are parts that I know we're going to talk about today. But it all starts with your very first data product. We'll talk about governance, I think, a little bit later. But that's kind of the answer to the first question, John. Where do I start, and how do I start?
Yeah, I think that's good. And I've heard Jean-Georges' answer to this, but maybe we have a different answer today. You guys are pretty consistent with what you've said in the past. Uh, how would you talk about that struggling with, I get the idea, but how do I get started? It's a good question. What would you add to Eric's answer?
Hmm.
Anything.
I think you've got to identify a use case, and you've got you've got to think the use case as a use case from a perspective of it needs to be realistic, uh, but it's also not going to you're not going to boil the ocean when you're doing that. Okay, so um, and and you may have the the teams I've been part of were usually building the infrastructure and the core tooling for the people that were actually going to implement the data products. And I think that you've got to be able to blend those teams in a way that to make sure that both teams are actually successful and that you're not going to oppose one team to another.
So, when you're saying that, are you talking about the platform team and the core product team that Eric was talking about? Are you,
Yeah, it's we Eric and I we don't always name the things the same way, but the thing is that's the idea. You've got your platform team and you've got your kind of implementation team or your data product teams. That is a little bit the inheritance of the old data engineering team you may have, and I think that's really it. Yeah.
okay, well, that's great. I know there's other questions here. And uh, I'm kind of thinking I want to ask Eric and you too, JGP. Do you want to try to answer some of the other questions, or should we introduce the picture, the model, or how we talk about starting the roadmap? Um,
Uh, yeah, why don't we? I'm going to try something daring, and I'm going to suggest that I try and share my screen uh, and see
Technology.
how that goes.
I'll make you co-host 1 second here.
Okay, wonderful. So this is one of the original PowerPoints that we had done. So this is a preview. This is different than what's in the book. The content's identical. Um, but
Now, I can't see it yet, Eric.
no, it's not there quite yet.
Okay, yeah.
Give me a moment.
It's coming from Toronto. It takes some time, you know.
Take some time. Take some time.
Is the internet up in Canada today?
You guys are giving me a hard time here. Sorry, this is just I'm gonna share my screen. It's gonna look kind of ugly, but say Livy, and I'll share it just for a short period of time. There.
Too late.
No, there we go. Okay, I think we're good.
Whoa.
There it is.
There it is. Okay, hopefully you can see that.
Yeah.
So in the book, I think it might be oriented a little differently. The content is identical. Yeah. We had to do that for the sizing and readability. But here's kind of what the lay of the land is. It looks like a transit map. I think, John, this is one of the things you mentioned earlier. And I think it's a quite appropriate analogy because there's multiple steps on the road to get there, multiple steps in the stop points in the destination. And on top of that, there's different ways of actually getting there. And sometimes you have to take, the long and the short road to actually get to your destination. Bottom line is we have, if you take a look at this transit map starts with a strategy and roadmap stream. And what you get out of that is you obviously you get your roadmap, you get your architecture. And this is all in the book, by the way. And most importantly, perhaps, is you get the list of prioritized outcomes. What are those projects that are going to deliver value? And hopefully what you do is you come up with a list of more than one. You get a rich and robust list. It lets you talk to some sponsors. And then all of a sudden what you have is a prioritized list of items. You take the top one, obviously, or one of the top ones. That becomes your proof of concept. But once you get to that point, you have 4 streams of work. You have the technology stream. And what that says, that's probably the one that we're all most comfortable with, where most of the people listening to this, I would venture to guess, are technologists. But you're going to be building some of the core technology capabilities. Sometimes that means leveraging what platforms already exist, and sometimes that may mean introducing some new stuff. The technology stream, once you've implemented the foundation capability, you industrialize it. In parallel, and this is where we start with the POC, now that we have some technology basic foundational capability available, you start with the factory stream. That starts with, again, a little bit more of the domain analysis potentially, but you start minimally with your first proof of concept. And it goes into an MVP. You have something into production. So you have learnings on how to build and you have learnings on how to put stuff into production. And then you begin to establish the data contracts, the templates, so you can actually move something and build data products at scale. So that's where the data product factory comes in. One of the pieces that we think are probably the most important is the operating model stream, the organizational side. So we've talked a little bit about it starts with teams. What does a core team structure looks like? I test it with my proof of concept, my MVP. But then I look at my operating model, which really says simplistically, how do I organize my teams to fulfill the business purpose and deliver the outcomes that the organization has? Now, you shouldn't look at this as time sequenced, by the way. It's organized the way it is for legibility and readability, which is why I'm going to say that on the operating model stream, we have governance in there. That is not at all the last thing you should be thinking about. In fact, you want to roll that up much, much earlier and start to get, as you establish your operating model, what should a governance model actually look like? And that's crucial. We have some opinions on that. They're in the book. The last one I'll mention here is the socialization stream. And I was talking to a fleet management company earlier today out of Europe, and this resonated very well with them. What I said is that if you are in the process of going about this and you've built your POC and you've got something into production, you should be telling people about your success. You should be having lunch and learns. You should be having executive sessions. You should be having your business sponsor talk to other business sponsors about what you've done. And hopefully what that ends up happening is you start to build some momentum. You got something real and in production, and now you have a community of supporters that will help you build more of these so that you get beyond, again, 1 is not a mesh, 5 is starting to be a mesh, 10 is a mesh. You get that momentum to start building the actual ecosystem of data products. And then obviously the last stage is the rollout, which is you do more of the same as we go. So That's the picture. I can keep that up, John, if you think that would be useful. But
Well,
that's the high level overview of what we have.
well, what I like about it is that it says that you start with strategy and roadmap, and then you have four concurrent things you're doing. And as a consultant, as a recovering consultant, I know that that's what it will look like. That's the pattern of the movie the script that we're going to go through. But each movie is different, and every person that goes on that journey has a different experience. So when you start to look at some of Robin's questions, let's take the first one about around technology and looking. Uh, Robin was saying, "Can you? Am I looking at it too technically from a technical perspective? Does the book give guidance around your approach to federated computation or governance of the domain teams? How would you answer those questions with this model in mind? Because I think it is helpful to think about each one of these streams when you're answering the questions. I think it'll bring it to life.
JGP, you want to give it a whirl?
Well, I was expecting you to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I can definitely do it because I know governance is a favorite of JGP. So
Well,
um,
and then GP can correct all of the mistakes.
ah, I know he will correct me. Uh, so governance means a whole bunch of different things to different people. What we did in the book is we anchored on what we think is a real world model that we should aspire to. And that model transforms the word governance into the word certification. And the model that we use for those in the United States, it's based off of Underwriters Lab. In Canada, it's the Canadian Standards Association, and I know that Europe has similar, and in Asia has similar type agencies. But effectively, their job is to make sure that products, real products like toasters and cars and what have you, you just use toasters for example, that a toaster that you buy will not burn your house down. And the way they do that, they certify it. And if it's certified, you typically get a little logo, the Underwriters Lab logo or the CSA logo on the device. And what that really says is that device meets the expectations of all the rules, regulations, and laws of the land, and you be comfortable that it works the way it's expected to. We applied that exact concept, that certification, to data products. So as opposed to having a, and by the way, I'm not suggesting this is the way all organizations are, but what we wanted to do was say that we wanted to form, because we have a data product who has a boundary and an owner and an empowered owner that's responsible for that, including the delegated governance, that the definition of policies in the data product should be the purview of the data product owner, with one exception, obviously. Those are the ones, the global ones related to perhaps security, privacy, that apply to all data products. But as much as possible, and this is where, Robin, the federated governance, federated computational governance comes in, we delegate the governance as much as possible, as much as is reasonable and appropriate, to the data product team. Now, when a data product is certified, what that means is that somebody, the data product owner, has offered a set of policies and that they have a mechanism to assess themselves against those policies. That assessment can be verified, validated, or redone by a third party if necessary, if it is that important a data product. And once that's done, you get the equivalent of the little logo on your toaster, except it's not Underwriters Laboratory. It is certified by your company name, for example. And at that point in time, you can be confident that the data product does what it's expected. It follows, as I said, the rules, regulations, and laws of the land, and that the consumers of that data product would be comfortable that, euphemistically, it's not going to burn the data house down. So there's a lot of mechanics, however, in how we do that. Things like data contracts are crucial to that, and tools to validate against the data contract. And that actually is where I'm going to turn it over to Jean-Georges, who is a renowned, I would argue, a renowned in world expert in data contracts. He's the head of the Bitol Foundation. Uh, so Jean-Georges, maybe I can ask you to just bring the whole data contract thing to life and how you use it to establish governance capabilities within some of the areas that you're in.
So, John, it's okay to tell Eric to stop at some point. I'm
No,
just telling you, okay? For
go
future.
like this. Okay. All right.
Uh, no, but the thing is, it's difficult to stop him because he's not wrong. If he were wrong, it would be easier. But what I think, and to go back a bit to Robin's question, is that we are currently lacking the tools to do all these things. Okay, so a lot of the time we are actually have to build the tools, and because they're not there, and that's why I think an initiative like Bitor, part of the Linux Foundation, is really important. It's because we don't have the tools and we don't have the pretension to build the tools, but we have the ambition to build the standards that will be implemented by the tools. So when you're thinking about data contract, that's why we're pushing something called ODCS, the Open Data Contract Standard. We just released version 3 of it. Uh, we have on the roadmap something like ODPS, the Open Data Product Standard. Uh, we have other standards on the roadmap, and which we are going to talk more in December. And I think this is where we are having great discussions with people that got it. Okay, so as Eric was talking with a logistic companies in Europe, I was talking with a software vendor in Europe this morning, and they want to implement ODCS and eventually later ODPS to make sure that their software is ready for this next wave of technology and data innovation. Okay, because they get it. Okay, and and this is more and more frequent. This is part of this revolution. Okay, I still don't know how we're going to call it, but I think this is in progress.
Yeah. So I like both of those answers, and I know I've asked to keep this diagram up. The reason I did that is because I want to challenge what you both said. I think what you both said is true, but it came after year or a lot of hard work to be able to simplify it down to something like this. Because I think a lot of people, maybe they entered the discussion around open data contracts, or maybe they entered the discussion around data products because a vendor brought it up, or they are reorganizing their IT team to different topologies. And so everybody's entering this discussion around data mesh at different places. And I think it's helpful to know that when you started your journeys, it wasn't all known beforehand what you have to do. So when people come to me and ask, maybe I answered it differently than you would have. They asked about open data contract standards. Well, they don't yet have a way to govern data quality issues yet. And so getting into a data contract for a engineering and software engineering and data engineering team that's really immature, don't have DevOps processes, it's really hard to think about implementing data contracts, is the one example I have. And so what I told that customer, what I'm helping that customer with is, oh, well, let's just step back. Let's get our DevOps to a certain level of quality so that we're managing objects in a repo. This is a very immature data team. But a lot of data teams out there, a lot of folks that are listening to this are like, God, I wish I could get all of this done, but I don't have all of these things in place that you realize you needed to have in place. And so what I like about this model for anybody listening to this is that it allows you to sort of slow down and say, well, okay, there's a lot of technology decisions that need to be made, but they're not the only ones. There's also, this question about domain analysis in the factory stream. Which domain do I tackle first? Well, that's probably driven by something that your organization uniquely has to focus on. And this idea of operating model stream where we reorganize teams and roles, that's very rare that a company does that before they have some evidence that it's worth going on this journey. And socializing your success would be great, but you have to have success. And so that's why I asked that question. Well, when you guys really got started, it was one product, it was one problem you were trying to solve, and you didn't try to boil all of these questions at once. And what I think is important for people that are reading this book, and why I thought this chapter was so important, is like, yes, 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 all of those are valid questions, and we will address them over time. But let's just get started by proving it's worth a journey worth doing. And so you have to have some sort of strategy of how you're going to do that. And I think it's worthwhile for people to think, step back and think strategically, like you're offering in chapter 16, which is sort
So,
of that.
yeah, if you allow me, John, the thing is, when we were working about this last chapter, we were also talking about whether we would do a maturity model, okay? And um, and we ended up giving up a little bit the idea of the maturity model because I think it's very and your recovering consulting self is probably happy about that. But I think the maturity model is also very specific to an enterprise, and I think what Eric and I wanted to do through our examples throughout the book, through the climate quantum company, we wanted to be very generic, but still very close to the field, as close as possible to the field, and sharing our experience there. And but but your point on, okay, the thing is, all of this, what is there to socialize if there's no success? What is there to model an operating model, stream, if there is not a reorg? But the thing is, if you're not thinking about those things at this stage, you're likely to fail. Okay. And it's not, I've seen too many times where, okay, I'm going to spend a a PI plan, a quarter, okay, to do something, and then at the end I'll see what's going on. But if you're not thinking about that, when you start your quarter, when you start your program increment, well, you're not going to do it, okay, and then you're going to have your success for your team. You can have a pizza and a bottle of Coke, and that's it, okay, and you're not going to scale. So I think that what's also coming with the book is the recipe for scaling.
Yeah. Well, that's a really important point. These are the areas that you need to be thinking about. You can't just sort of let it unfold without some conscious view of what you're trying to achieve in those other streams. Because if you don't realize, if you're not able to socialize your success, or if you're not able to organize your teams, like change the way the teams are structured, if that's required in your environment, you're not going to be able to achieve the technology rollout or necessarily the implementation. It's not going to be part of your development process, and you'll never get uh, the factory stream scaling out unless you are thinking about all of those things at the same time. And sorry for maybe misparaphrasing what you were saying, but I think for a lot of people thinking about that strategy and roadmap stream, and I was just checking, you've only got a page or two that talks about that, but I think that's the time you take to sort of get organized around how you want to introduce this change in your organization. You have to have a strategy to do that is one of the other takeaways from this. Do you agree? Does that make sense? Or is there anything you would add to that, either JGP or Eric?
I'll take a stab at it. I think you summarized all of it quite well. The strategy has a very simple purpose, and that is to map out what happens next. But in order to do that, you have to have a few things in your kit. You have to know what it is that you want to get out of this. What's the destination? You need to know a little bit about in our case, the technology landscape that you have to work with. So, what is the architecture? It's kind of like when you're building a house. We all have a vision. We look at Architecture Digest or whatever the most relevant magazine is, and we go, "That's what I want." But ultimately, somebody then comes back and gives you a blueprint of the house. Okay. And that's the equivalent of the architecture. And then once you have the blueprint, somebody then has to say that vision is going to be built based on this blueprint in 1 year. And oh, by the way, here's kind of the drops of here's when we put the walls in, here's when the electricity goes, and here's when you can actually move in. And oh, by the way, here's when you're actually going to pay us type thing. So that strategy is it just I think about it in real world analogies. It's like building a house and the steps you have to do there so that you can actually know where the vision is and have a compelling and practical way to actually get there. The strategy, though, the thing related to here is we're building a house as a kind of a single destination. What we have here is the opportunity to build many houses. We're building a community, a data product mesh community. So the real question that we add to this is what does the community look like? What is in the community? Which data products do you actually want to build? What's the sequence of houses in the community or data products in the data mesh that you actually want to build? And how do I actually prioritize those? Now, that prioritization forces you to have a dialogue around the business outcomes that you want to get for each of the data products and which are the most important. And there's a bunch of different ways you can categorize that, which ones meet the regulatory needs, which ones get us into a new geographic market the fastest, which ones drive the most revenue. There's a whole bunch of different criteria, but the opportunity you have is to figure out, which of those data products should I actually focus on first and why, and who do I have to engage with to actually get there. So the strategy is in one way it's the definition of the vision, but it's actually so much more.
Yeah. Now, I think we can take down the visual. I think it served its purpose. And I'm not sure if it's better to see our heads or the visual, but I'll argue our heads might be, we'll go for now. Maybe we should have used more visuals earlier in the series. But anyway, so I want to take this really practical and tactical question that Robin asked also is ODC, ODCS, ODPS. Looks like a great way to standardize, but how do I automate all of the things around those? And that's a great question, Robin. I constantly am asking myself that and asking these two guys, and they always give me a good answer. Let's hear what they have to say today. Jean-Georges, do you want to, how do I automate all of those things around those?
So as I was saying a little bit, my motivation and the group motivation for BTOL and ODCS and ODPS is not to provide tooling. We hope that tooling is going to come, and honestly, I see more than I see a profound wave coming with the number of people I'm talking to, and even the interest of really major company these days. Um, but right now, you still have to do it by hand or by, hacking or by with your. We don't have the Swiss Army knife of the data contract yet. Okay, my friends data contract.cli have an open source tool, which is a great way to get started. So that's data contract CLI on GitHub. They have a few other tools that helps you manage data contract, but it's not a full automation yet, okay? And it's not, it helps you create stuff, it helps you enrich stuff. I've seen some tools using ODCS and even thinking about using ODPS. So it's coming, okay? But I'm sorry, Robin, I don't have the catalog of tools you can pick and choose from that will help you simplify your job. It means that there's still some development, or if you're not in the capacity of developing, push your vendors to adopt those standards, okay? Because that's also one way as a user, you've got to push your vendors to adopt standards. And you will get some pushback because software vendors, they love lock-in. They love to lock you in something, and they don't want you to have standards. I know some, on the surface they say, "Oh, we love standards," but in reality, if standards facilitate you to choose between different governance tools, they don't want that too much. Okay, they so it's you as a user to demand to have these standards implemented.
I love it. It brings up a question we also often get is what categories of software tooling are you seeing that you would want to influence their standards around? And I hear a lot about data catalogs, data marketplaces, and
Those are the easy ones, because they seem so obvious and discoverability is such a problem in our industry. Uh, but even data governance as a whole is not obvious. Okay, different people have different definition of data governance or data quality, um, and the scope of data governance in a way. How far does it go? Um, I think there's a lot of interesting development. I've seen friends doing that, where they take a data product and they kind of generate all the infrastructure from what they discover in the data product. So it's kind of a data product to infrastructure as code to Terraform, something like that. Okay, so it's not a that's something I see quite often. It's a great way of simplifying deployment and building infrastructure and provisioning of infrastructure. ODCS version 3 add specifically some infrastructure component to actually simplify this process. Um, I see tools around the help and development, the developer experience. So, for example, we've got people like data catering that are using data contracts to generate synthetic data. And the goal of synthetic data is really to give data to developers so they don't have to work with potentially protected and sensitive data. But it also, the goal is to feed AI systems so that I can actually create models based on synthetic data. So there's the role of synthetic data is important in our industry. So that's two examples from the top of my head there that are not related to yet another data catalog or marketplace.
I like it. So synthetic data, I can see a very clear connection because the contract specifies what the expectation is, and the synthetic data tool uses its requirements for generating synthetic data. I don't know if I've oversimplified it, but uh, does that also have a role in test data management? Do you see that as well as playing a role. It came up in a discussion I had a few weeks ago. Hey, could we use, if we adopt the contract standard, does that allow us to be more specific about test data management? Or am I conflating two things that probably don't belong together? Or I'd just get your opinion on that, I think would
No,
be.
actually, you're right. The people doing the synthetic data catering, Peter Fluke, is actually doing test data management with data contract as well. Okay, so it totally makes sense, John. I mean, um, you know, the philosophy is your data contract becomes your source of truth for metadata. Okay, and when you've acquired this, okay, if you stop resisting, resistance is futile. Um, you you get to that. You will see a new world being opened. Okay, you're going to be assimilated by the collective.
Okay, so we just need to get into it, get started, and get those knock-on effects.
It's
Uh,
your track.
oh, gosh, I haven't been managing time. We're at the end of our 1 hour commitment. Is there anything you wanted to say before we wrap, Eric, that I didn't give you a chance to?
No, no. Judging by how long I tend to talk, I don't think I could answer or add more details in a minute. I'm just going to say thank you to John yourself for moderating and keeping us in line.
Well, it's always my pleasure. I enjoy this. And anybody that's listening that wants to follow up with these two authors, I know they're very available. I don't know if LinkedIn is the preferred channel, but there's lots of ways you can get to them, especially LinkedIn, myself as well. The continuation of this conversation will happen over the next few months, and we'll be taking on new topics. So if you've got suggestions, or interests, please let us know through the community. And thank you all.
Thank you,
See you next
folks.
time.
Salut!
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, John, for being our moderator through all these discussions, and of course, thanks to Eric and JGP for lending us your expertise.
Hey, see you, Paul. Take
All right,
care.
have a good one, everybody.